Good morning. In 2012, actor Michael Mando, now of Better Call Saul fame, was cast as the antagonist for the video game Far Cry 3, and one of the earliest instances of video game virality was born. Mando's character, Vas Montenegro, iconically toys with and chides the game's protagonist while you try to search an island in search of your friends after crash landing. More than once, Vas has the character dead to rights. It would be so easy to dispatch you. But instead we get lectured. Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity? Vas asks the player, and by extension you, the audience. Insanity, he explains, is doing the same thing again and again and again, and expecting different results. Only after repeatedly telling you the futilities of repetition does Vas actually attempt to finish you off. But this isn't the story of Vas or his brother Haas, who controls the local avocado trade. This is the story of my 20s, and how I went insane. Just as Vas asks the audience, I'll ask you, what is a video game? What are its components, and what does it require? What is widely considered to be the first video game, 1958's Tennis for Two, was played on an oscilloscope, and its assignment as a video game came from the player's ability to influence the game via active participation. To me and many others, this is the key part of what makes a video game a video game. Moving forward to the arcade era and later the home gaming eras, this aspect persisted. When you input a command, something happens on screen, and progress is therefore gated by your ability to input the correct commands under specific conditions. You must actively run and jump to reach the flagpole. You must actively kill zombies and find the next key to unlock the door and leave. You must actively hunt down and kill the demons to proceed to the next level. You must actively plan and defeat the boss robots so you can move forth and use their weapon against the final boss. The game we're talking about today, Legends of Idleon, is what's referred to as an idle game. Contrasting to the traditional games we just described, in idle games you input your actions and wait. Progression usually isn't dependent on reflexes or skill, instead based loosely on knowledge, but most importantly, on how much real-world time has passed since you last interacted with it. With the latest content introduced, it's arguably more effective to not play the game than to do so actively. Idleon is like a Coke freestyle machine for waiting. If you think this sounds boring, you're halfway to the point. Idle hands are the devil's playthings, and an idle mind can be a game developer's favorite toy. Growing up, I had a friend named Ryan who lived with his mother and sister. His parents somewhat estranged from each other. I say somewhat because from time to time throughout the years, his dad would appear like a phantom and stay with them for weeks or months at a time, often without warning. Or maybe there was warning, and they just didn't tell me, the 12-year-old friend of their son. I probably wouldn't have told me either if I was them. Anyway, you'd go over to Ryan's house to hang out, and there, taking up the computer, was Brent. I didn't quite understand it at the time, but Brent was a madman whose utter depravity I couldn't begin to comprehend until the same corruption filled my soul all these years later. A digital kingpin to some, the binary slumlord to others, Brent's main fascination was the MySpace and later Facebook-bound Zynga game, Mafia Wars. In the game you played as a virtual mobster, spending your in-game energy to complete various tasks and crimes for your digital family, and then waiting real-time hours to get more energy in order to repeat the cycle. The family's sole desktop computer was kept in a room at the far edge of the house, a room filled with a couch, bookshelves, various homely decorations, and of course the computer desk. When Brent appeared, however, these all became surfaces for data collection. Pages upon scraps upon napkins upon pages on every surface, stacked on the desk, pinned under framed photos and novels on the bookshelves, scattered on the floor as if tossed about by an absent wind. Data everywhere. Top to bottom, front and back, margins crammed to their physical capacity. Sloppily structured columns and lines filled with the usernames of his fellow online mobsters. The columns listed names, roles, whether they are able to boost other players or pay for microtransactions, the times they were online, both in their time zone and also in Brent's. Basically every metric you could imagine for tracking and organizing a virtual family. Some sheets would be nothing but lonely towers of numbers looming off the page to try and find their legend. No indication of where in the piles they belong, a duty of remembrance silently tasked to their creator. Looking back, I don't see why Brent didn't use like a spreadsheet. Brent was a smart guy. I'm really not trying to demonize him here with my storytelling. He seemed like a smart cookie. If it came down to it, I'm sure he would have had no issue finding a cracked copy of Excel, or he could have just asked one of his many subordinates to find it for him. What if one of their many dogs came into the room and tussled things about? La cosa no mostra, I guess. Because the story takes place in the Midwest, their family drank a lot of sweet tea, though their consumption would surge and peak whenever Brent would move his base of operations into the home. It was, of course, Our beloved baby boy Ryan's chore to make sure the jug of sweet tea never got low enough to even suggest the idea of one day being empty. To many a people around these parts, sweet tea is their lifeblood. So it's really not much of a stretch to say that Ryan's brewing duties kept his father alive, and in a way those steeping tea bags were like vertebrae in the backbone of his father's career. I wonder how many people carried on in their Mafia War lives, not knowing a 12-year-old boy's chore schedule kept them from the brink of ruin. However, the jug of sweet tea was not a very large jug, and as I've just poetically conveyed, the man drank a lot of sweet tea. Our merry band of dweebs would be doing something, and from that end of the house we'd hear the steeper's call of, "Ryan, no tea!" I wonder if Brent has ever played Idleon. Because much like Idleon, Mafia Wars was an idle game, and could reasonably be considered Idleon's grandpa, or at least the weird uncle that's no longer invited to Thanksgiving. In Mafia Wars, time is a currency you can accumulate and invest into completing actions which leads to progression. In Idleon, the passage of time itself is the active investment. Both require the passive use of your real-time hours of your actual life, a gate which can be merrily hopped over by paying real actual money from your wallet. This story of my friend's father is almost 2 decades old at this point. So what happens to those games and concepts with a time investment of such scale? What is the natural evolution of that type of game when it isn't malicious, when the goal is fun instead of exploitation? Through my endless boredom odysseys, I'm led to believe that evolution leads to Idleon, with more active and interactive elements that give things a more traditional feel, while still having progression gated to real-world time passed. At its very core, the DNA of Idleon is the same as Farmville. Click this, and wait. The fact that there is an endless labyrinth of systems and mechanics overlapping and interconnecting, twisting and turning to be stuffed into the gaps between each other, that's just the cherry on top. Despite the heart of these games being waiting and the commitment being of time spent passively, I would watch Brent sit at that computer desk for hours or days at a time, breaking only to use the restroom, to sleep, to get more sweet tea. Sometimes he slept on the couch in the same room, so he could more readily access his middle-of-the-night tasks. I thought it was odd. I thought it was insane. I thought he was an absolute lunatic to spend his days hunched over his keyboard and his notes, planning the kidnapping and extortion of pixels and integers. What could possibly entice a man to wake in the night and disrupt his own rest, just to go click a few digital buttons that would have no tangible real-life effects whatsoever? Then May 30th, 2024 came along, and it happened to me. On that day, I opened Steam to see Idleon being promoted, with a big in-game bonus promised to those who created a new account. The game's free to play, so why not? Years ago, before they contemplated selling off all of our genetic data to questionable actors, I did a 23andMe test and it told me that my heritage is 1% Jewish. Due to that, I can proudly say and with my chest, I like free shit. I glanced at the game and, charmed by its art style, thought it might be something I could waste a few hours with in the background of doing other important computer tasks. I downloaded it and created an account, but I had to think of a name for my first character. I'm not getting deeply invested in this game, I told myself. Probably won't even come back to it after today. I typed the first thing that came to mind, Sporg124, not knowing that would effectively be the name used to identify and refer to my account. I did not record footage of this then because, why would I? For illustrative purposes, I make a new account now, named Gaping Peehole. The opening of Idleon is a cinematic experience. Your character slashes their way through the world before encountering the Troll, who kindly convinces you to jump into a giant hole. Your lifeless body then ragdolls down several maps before landing in the World 1 town. At this point, you can do whatever you want, as long as that includes either mining, chopping, or slaughtering defenseless little precious green mushrooms. They don't even have arms, man! If you want to make any form of real progress, you at least have to chat with Scripticus and loosely follow along with quests until you're able to assign a class for your character. In order to progress through the maps and follow the game's progression, you assign your character to a location and you leave them alone. After a certain amount of enemies have been slain, the next map opens up and you can do it again, although with a new enemy, a new landscape, new item drop, yada yada yada. On the second map after the innocent green mushrooms, you'll encounter the NPC Prometheus, who grants your character a class promotion to either an archer, warrior, or mage. Aside from the class-specific attacks and abilities, each type also specializes in one or more types of resource collection, adding another layer to the spaghetti plate of planning. Mages favor chopping, archers bug catching, and warriors prefer to mine. It's around this time you may also unlock your second character, depending on how much time you've left for the game to just do its thing. You can name it something like Malformed Peehole, but not really because I've obviously just taken the name for myself. Before this video is over, I'm going to have the whole urethral family to myself, stuck on an account I'll likely never touch again. Good riddance. This is the point where the game started to actually make sense to me. You have your main character, good old Sporg or Pee-hole Man, who can be left to keep making progress fighting through the worlds while you're setting up malformed Pee-hole to go waste his life away mining in the dark, away from the sunshine and any feeling of love. But wait, it'd be more effective if malformed Pee-hole at least made it over to Prometheus so he can spec into a warrior in order to receive all the mining related bonuses that come with that class assignment. Since we just made Sporg a mage, shouldn't we instead let him spend time chopping some oak trees to start building up his woodcutting ability and thus our capacity to procure logs? You leave the game overnight, you come back the next day, and you've gained enough levels to unlock your third character, Rip Tip to Open. And of course the common sense thing would be to make them an archer so your party is rounded out with one of each class, right? You notice there's a total of 12 character slots on the selection screen, and ink fills the pen that scribbles your thoughts onto the back of your brain. Yet every time you make your way to Prometheus, you have to pass through the green mushrooms and the frogs and the giant fucking beans. They don't even have arms, man. You may have looked into your menu by this point and noticed they're not even called just beans or bean person. No, they're called board beans because they're not even excited to see you. They don't care at all if all you do is cut down their brethren. They'll just respawn anyway. Life is meaningless to the bean. Their cold, dead eyes evoke a primal level of rage within me.
I want to eat a live one.
So what, is this game just clicking on a map, waiting, clicking on the next map, waiting, so on and so forth until the eventual heat death of the universe? No. I wouldn't waste my time, or your time if that was the case. The mechanics of Idleon are mainly split into two economies, combat and skilling. We've already briefly touched on the combat, wherein a character placed on a map will battle the enemy creature until a certain amount of kills has been reached, at which time a magic portal opens and you're able to progress to the next map, thus perpetuating the cycle. Your character will kill, whether you're at the computer or not, and whether or not you're at the computer determines your progress rate. The two options both have their benefits and drawbacks depending on what your current goal is and what class your character is. Later on, however, the kill count required to open portals grows so great, and your character's so powerful, that active play is actually a detriment, and it's more efficient to leave your character AFK. Combat itself has two binary modes. You can either have granular control over the player in every action, movement, and skill cast, or you can set it to auto to relinquish any and all influence over your character. There is no in between. The downside here is that auto will almost always be vastly more effective and time efficient, due to the computer being able to click and activate things faster than you are physically able to. The only time you really benefit from manual combat is when facing boss monsters early on, at which point it's useful to be able to manually dodge and target specific areas. You will, however, quickly grow powerful enough to be able to disregard that part completely and simply one-shot the bosses. So once again, not actively participating in combat often gives greater yield than actively playing the video game. What about the other economy of the game? Maybe that'll be different. The other part is skilling, which many consider one of the biggest draws of Idleon. That is truly a baffling thing to me. Like, in more than one video and or stream, I've heard people in the Idleon sphere talk about how it does skilling right, and they find games without good skilling to be lackluster. I wonder if going outside is a skill any of these people have put time into. In this context, skilling refers to the systems, mechanics, and advancement of character talents such as cooking, wood chopping, bug catching, ore mining, smithing, fishing, and more. Some people also call these digital chores. So how does this work, and why does its design inspire such lust in my fellow gamers? We'll start with the first skill you encounter in the game, wood chopping. To entice you with a taste of what's to come, one of the first quests in the game is to chop down a tree. You don't chop down the tree, of course. You just click the tree and your guy waddles over and begins chopping. All the better if you have an axe equipped. If not, I guess your guy just shatters every bone in his hand, giving it a good karate whack, while the quest giver stands there staring, looking pleased with himself. The active components of skilling are the mini-games attached to most of the available skills. In chopping, you have to click the button when the marker is within a certain range. In mining, you have to dodge ore deposits. I mean, bug catching is just Flappy Bird. It's 2025. We can call out when things are just blatantly Flappy Bird. At least call it Floppy Bug or something. Come on, Lava. However, you cannot play these minigames endlessly, as you're given a set amount of minigame plays per day. This amount is not exclusive between skills either, it's across all minigames. For example, if you're a new player and you start the game and for whatever reason get really into the chopping game, you can't then go play the mining minigame to try it out because you've used up all of your plays. The only solution here is to wait until the game's daily reset point. Additionally, you can also pay more real-life money in order to get more plays per day. Okay, so how do you progress with these skills? What does advancement look like? What happens when you get to like level 120 in chopping? Yeah. You remember the part where I said you click the tree and your fella begins chopping? Yeah, it's that. You can leave your game open and manually collect all of your logs, but this is another instance of it being more efficient to leave the game AFK than to actively play it. Your character will gain skill experience after every successful chop that provides a log. After enough time has passed and you've accumulated the requisite experience points, that skill levels up and so does your proficiency in that skill, which adds into the calculation of how many logs you can get per chop. Once the result of that calculation grows high enough, you can then progress on to the next type of tree to chop down. Since it's a tougher tree, you get very few logs at first, so you level up the skill and upgrade your axe to boost your proficiency and overall stats. That way you can get more logs. And eventually, dude, you're just swimming in logs, fucking drowning in logs, trust me. And your skill is high enough that now you can move on to the next type of tree to chop down. But perhaps I'm focusing too much on chopping. Let's talk about mining. In mining, you click on an ore vein and your character waddles over and begins mining. All the better if they have a pickaxe equipped. If not, I guess your fella just rips the skull out of their own fucking head and begins bashing it into the rocks to chip off iron shavings or whatever. Your character will gain skill experience after every successful pickaxe swing that provides ore. After enough time has passed and you've accumulated the requisite experience points, that skill levels up and so does your skill proficiency, which adds into the calculation of how much ore you can get per swing. Once that's high enough, you can progress on to mining the next type of ore. But perhaps I'm focusing too much on chopping. Let's talk about bug catching. Your character will gain skill experience after every successful rod catches a bug that provides a fish. After enough time has passed and you've accumulated the requisite experience points, that skill levels up and so does your skill proficiency, which adds into the calculation of how many bugs you can get per swing. Once that's high enough, you can progress on to catching the next type of bug. Thankfully, not every skill follows this exact formula. For example, the cooking skill is entirely passive. Once you unlock World 4, you get cooking experience by simply placing your fella in the kitchen and forgetting they exist. Laboratory, another World 4 skill, is also passive. But this time, if you need to take that character out of lab to do literally anything else, it can actively penalize you for messing up account-wide bonuses and unlocks. The third World 4 skill, breeding, well, Lava didn't gamify the conception part of pregnancy, so that means it must be the gestation period. Also passive.
Ladies, comment below if you think your pregnancy was more active or AFK.
The only one of these to really have an active component or minigame is breeding, which includes the pet battles system whose rewards feed into unlocking further progression in the cooking skill. This facet surprisingly doesn't factor into breeding level much. The only real benefit to leveling up breeding is to unlock a couple level gated upgrades. After that, it only really boosts the XP multiplier to make it level up faster for the sake of a higher XP multiplier. I haven't touched my eggs in months, man, I'll be honest with you. I do have to give credit for the later skills that actually do require a small amount of cognitive involvement. In World 5, you unlock the sailing and gaming skills, both of which have perpetual minigames that aren't locked away behind an amount of daily plays. They're full, autonomous, proper systems that have game-wide effects and benefits. In World 6, you get farming, which requires you to manage plots of land and time crops and their growth. The sneaking skill has a minigame where your character passively infiltrates a cursed tower to sneak to the top and then reset and do it again? Is there a point or a plot to the sneaking skill? Seems almost like there would be. What's up with this guy? Anyone know? The crown jewel of World 6 is the summoning skill. Summoning's so damn good and popular that it spawned a yet-to-be-released, but recently delayed, spin-off game called IdleManeZed. Until more recent updates, there is a set amount of stages in the summoning minigame, with no ability to replay those completed stages. You're still unable to replay those stages, but with the infinite summoning mechanic, as well as the new summoning bosses, there's always going to be another milestone for you to reach for. The most recent addition at time of this video is Spelunking, the darling of World 7. In Spelunking, you wait passively for your character's energy bar to fill up. Then you enter a minigame wherein you click on tiles to harvest materials and try to find the hole that goes lower in that cave. Once you've done this enough, your character power will grow great enough that you can challenge the next cave. In the next cave, you click on tiles to harvest materials and find the hole to progress. So eventually you can move on to the next cavern where you click on tiles. Damn it, dude, these are just the earlier skills with extra steps! The whole loop of this game is just set your character to passively do something. They do it for a period of time that is determined by the amount of effort and time already invested into this task. You're then able to move that character onto doing the same task at a different location for a different yet similar reward for a period of time that is determined by the amount of effort and time already invested into that skill. Repeat. This is just digital chores, man! This is like trying to get a kid to eat their vegetables, but instead of tricking them by doing the airplane thing and covering with cheese, you've locked the broccoli behind a fucking Rube Goldberg machine. But here's the problem. I like broccoli. I enjoy being mentally stimulated because I am very smart. I like Rube Goldberg machines. If you only had 1 or 2 characters under your control in Idleon, it might actually be the worst designed game ever, or at least Zynga would have tried to buy it by now. But at the time of writing, you have 10 available, with those last 2 of the dozen staying locked for the time being, a tease of possibility. Idleon works less like a traditional RPG or action game and more like an economy. That's even how I describe the 2 main parts of the game. As you progress, the hunger for resources only grows greater, and even after you're able to generate far past the maximum amount of resources, there are other economies such as the Atom Collider that work off of and grow based off how obscenely overmaxed and how overpowered that first market has become. It's only writing this script that I start to understand the appeal of games like Factorio. Starting in World 3, you gain access to the 3D printer. As a side note, my high school got a 3D printer the year after I graduated, and I'm still salty about it. With the 3D printer, your character generates resources even when installed at those skilling or combat locations or nodes. With an upgrade, your character can generate 2 different resources at once, reliably rewarded every hour. Across 10 characters, that means you're able to passively generate significant tangible quantities of 20 different resources at a time, plus 10 more from the current and active activities of the characters themselves.
If you have ADHD, your brain may have lit up just as mine did all those many moons ago.
The allure of Idleon isn't in the skilling or the combat. It isn't in the minute-to-minute gameplay or, hell, the day-to-day gameplay. The allure of Idleon is in trying to understand and orchestrate layers upon layers of systems and mechanics that are all spaghetti knotted together in opaque ways, all for the ultimate satisfaction of number go up, the focused pursuit of success solely for the improvement of the metrics. Layers of economy at scale, all dependent on the sole input of your time. Truly, a majority of the game's content can be completed in a bit over a week's time, and that isn't an exaggeration. World 1 took me about that long when I first began Idleon, for example. It took me a month to get to World 3, which is embarrassing to say as a now seasoned player. Fellow YouTuber and one of the main Idleon streamers and authorities, IdleManeZed recently did a complete run from brand new account to the end of World 5 in only a week's time, all without a single microtransaction and without paying for the auto loot feature. World 6 and World 7 have added padding to prevent such types of accelerated progression, but I see that more of a request to savor the meal rather than rush the experience. While IdleMane's progress does rely heavily on knowledge obtained through his tenure, it's an example of what's possible as the player, and enhances the mystery of the why and how so many people have spent months, years, dollars, and dreams simply grinding away in Idleon, waiting for more content that they're already overpowered for and will likely find no challenge in.
I mean, I can't speak to everyone as to why they play video games, but I play it because it's fun. It helps me fill time while I'm working if there's downtime. And, you know, Idleon fills that gap perfectly because I could just sit there, press auto, like manage my inventory for 3 seconds, go back to work. You know, it's not that time consuming. It doesn't interact with my daily activities at all. But to some people it does, you know, and that's good to them if they can manage it. It's not good to them if they can. And it can become an obsessive spiral I've seen in some people that I've talked to.
So through the pursuit of number go up, you may have noticed a little quirk. Mainly, why don't any of the numbers make any fucking sense? Oh, simple. It's because there's 2 types of math in Idleon. Huh? That's right. There's both additive and multiplicative calculations. Take, for example, drop rate, the main number that factors into calculating the type, quantity, and frequency of items that monsters will drop. If you've boosted this to a figure of 12 times the base stat, you might expect a plus 100% bonus to bring that 12 up to a respectable 24. Nope. Most of the math in Idleon is additive, at least until you get incredibly deep into the endgame progression. So with a 100% boost, that 12 instead becomes a 13. Where is this explained, you ask? Some of these calculations are also algorithmic instead of linear, because why not? The player base already can't read, surely algebra is appropriate here instead. For example, in sneaking, when discovered, your character gets knocked out. which apparently means they instantly lose consciousness. Their bodies just lay there undisturbed until they pop back perfectly fine however many moments later. Seriously though, what the fuck is the lore of the sneaking skill in the Cursed Tower of Deadly Detection? There is an upgrade for your fella that reduces the amount of time their ragdoll form remains on the ground like a toddler throwing a tantrum, and this skill works as a percentage reduction of the time spent on said floor. You would expect a 100% reduction to mean that once beat upon the head by the eyes of that thing, you would just instantly spring back to form. Nope. Supposedly the calculation for this sort of thing is simply 1 divided by 1 plus the reduction level. So you're always scaling ever slightly closer to a true 100% without being able to touch it. This opacity of many mechanisms leads to one of the reasons I was so drawn to Idleon, which is also the main reason I think it's reached such a level of success. The community.
You know, number one, Idleon's a great game in the sense that, you know, there's a lot of content to do. There's a lot of things to do. So it satiates my personal appetite for video games. And secondly, the community that I built is also one of the reasons why I stay here, because there's a lot of great people that I speak with in the Discord. Not to delve into parasocial relationships or anything, I don't know anything about these people. They just are cool people to talk with, right? And so we'll just be talking about the game, or like, I think we're on day 36 of our Wordle streak. So that's been fun. There's also a meme section. People upload their cat pictures and stuff. It's great.
Because so many things interconnect, it's hard to get a decent understanding of the game without some sort of information source to help you along. The game's wiki is well regarded and well kept, listing almost every facet of every asset in the game, and there are multiple websites and utilities designed for the sole purpose of helping you navigate the avalanches of tasks and information that are dumped upon you. It almost seems impossible to get into late game content without having used these resources to aid you and act as a sort of external dashboard of everything that's going on. To the creators of Idleon Toolbox and Idleon Efficiency, you are to the Idleon community what Ryan's tea brewing duties were to a family of Mafia War players. Due to the nature of Idleon, this means that the content made around the game isn't like that of most games. There aren't compilations of sweet gameplay moments, no tidily edited headshot compilations or displays of technical prowess. Instead, almost all of the content around Idleon is educational. It's just people teaching each other how to play and understand the game. Likewise, the main streamers of the game aren't these high-octane personalities that you'd expect if you've watched high-profile streamers of other genres and games. Streams frequently reach into the 7 to 8 hour mark or longer, which isn't as wild as it used to be, but I do need to remind you that the main activity of this game is waiting. While of course every streamer has their own style, most streams of the game start off with doing the daily Idleon tasks, but after an hour or so will fade into just general chatting and question answering or advice giving.
Genuinely though, as Lava, I'm not sure how I would feel if I made a widely successful game and found out that the reason the community is so passionate is brotherly is because no one can figure out what the fuck is going on.
Perhaps my favorite example of this is, in the arcade shop there's a character upgrade you can purchase, and each upgrade tier provides you with a higher percentage of burger. What do I mean by that? I speak not in code or riddles, dear viewer. The upgrade is literally % burger.
So what does the burger upgrade do? Is there a secret burger stat in the game hidden from the menus? Can anyone tell me?
Oh, it does nothing. Burger does nothing, but you can still spend your hard-earned limited supply of pachinko balls on it, and you only have to visit an external resource in order to figure out that it in fact does nothing. But for days after it appeared, most streamers and community members insisted it had to do something. To this present day, and certainly into future days, stream chats and Discord logs will be filled with people asking what burger does.
I can talk about game mechanics that waste your time and stories of my friend's father from childhood, but that's not what this video is about. I told you at the start. This video is about how I wasted my 20s and how I went insane.
One of my favorite musical artists is a man named Evan Weiss, frontman of the bands Into It, Over It, Pet Symmetry, There, and many, many more, on top of running the Storm Chasers record label. He's a busy guy, and his work has accompanied me in the most intimate manner throughout the various stages of my life since shortly into high school. It's not an exaggeration to say that his voice has literally been the soundtrack to my life for most of my life. Evan's a firm believer in the craft of album packaging and liner notes, and I share the faith. There's a sacred feeling when listening to a piece you love, turning over the packaging in your hands, holding the album art between your fingers and reading the lyrics and notes despite already knowing every word. It is another dimension of intention that so many never choose to interact with. In these notes and postscripts of Evan's, a line that's persisted for years is "Stay hungry."
He's not advocating for anorexia, as I would often joke to myself, but to maintain that yearning and desire for growth and expression. This, ultimately, is where I slipped and failed myself. From nearly the moment I graduated high school, I worked and grinded away most of my days. Of course, everyone has to work and support themselves. I'm not naive or making an absurd claim that I'm special because I put in 40 hours a week. Because I was hip and with it, I stopped in one day and recognized Kanye West's album 808s and Heartbreak in vinyl format, sitting on a shelf looking pretty, marked down to about $25. I should clarify, clearly, this is back when Kanye was cool, before he was a Nazi. I do not support Nazis. I didn't have a record player, but I kept glancing at it. I didn't even know modern hip-hop was pressed to vinyl, to tell you how deep in the culture I was at the time. So I looked up the release and saw that it was selling on the secondhand market for a couple $100. To a college boy making 10 cents above minimum wage, that was an alluring prospect. And so my obsession with resale, or flipping, began. For almost a decade after that point, my days would consist of going to work, then immediately heading to check out local stores and thrift shops for inventory, ending the day by returning home to list items, answer emails, and pack orders until it was time to sleep. The only exceptions to this were Saturdays, when I'd usually try to hang out with some friends for a handful of hours, then return home and resume working. Or Sundays, where I'd usually try to take a half day, but would often just end up working instead. To this day, at about the 3-hour mark of any social interaction, I feel a strong pull to leave because, well, something needs done, and it surely isn't getting done by lollygagging around. Much like Idleon, over time my skills grew and I leveled up as a shopkeeper. I had 100% positive feedback on Discogs. I was a star seller on eBay. The shirts I designed and sold on Etsy and Amazon were popular enough that they were bootlegs from copycat sellers. But yet all of these metrics and milestones were meaningless and hollow. Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity? The pandemic happened and commerce slammed to a halt. People stopped ordering things and the stores where I would source my inventory were all closed. Thankfully, due to declining almost every invitation to everything ever for the sake of my work, I had never spent a whole lot of my profits. Throughout all the years, I'd only gone on one vacation, with my best friend at the time. I spent the majority of that trip just laying on the bed in the hotel room, finally able to semi-relax from being so far from my base of operations that I was physically unable to do any work. I figured I'd try investing. This was around the time of the GameStop frenzy, and everything was going well until the Russian invasion of Ukraine began, and thus the world markets took a violent retch in which myself and many others lost almost everything as a result of panicked decision-making. In the end, most of my work had been for nothing. Every concert I didn't go to, every road trip I stayed home from, every late night I declined because I had orders waiting at home, every date I turned down because every inch of my bedroom was covered in either inventory or packing supplies. Plus, who even has the time to invest in and maintain a relationship anyway? All of it was wasted, with nothing to show. Well, I can package things like nobody's business. At least I have that. One day I woke up and I was 29, with barely a notion of how I got there or what I was doing. It felt like I'd been sleepwalking through a life that wasn't mine. Through my life, I've always been an avid gamer. My PlayStation controller had always been kept within reach for those rare moments that I didn't have an order to pack or an email to answer. With nothing else to fill the time, I remember this period of spiritual stillness as when gaming was just what I did. I started streaming and even became deeply entwined in the communities of a few other semi-local streamers. Due to overzealous confidence, my branding remains a scar from this period, a constant reminder that mistakes make the man. I didn't reach any degree of success from streaming, and the other creators I'd befriended both decided to step away from their streams and communities without warning, ghosting everyone in the process. With their leaders gone, their communities faded and died off almost instantly. Once again, I felt like I'd put a lot of myself into something just to have it disappear. While this time it had all been factors outside of my control, it still felt like a personal failure. I still blamed myself for these unknown deeds that had undone everything. Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity?
I think we've entered a very postmodern era of civilization where, the more concrete human goals don't matter as much as personal satisfaction. So I understand why people spend thousands of hours in video games, because it's more fun than going out in life and being depressed all the time with world events.
Then one day, I found Idleon. To me, Idleon became something to occupy my mind and keep it away from lingering on malignant thoughts. I became an optimization machine, because every bit of progress is another step away from perceived failure, if only for a moment. Because there are so many mechanics that are always active and overlapping, There's always something to consider, something to think of, something to look forward to, something to plan. Because of the required investment of intellectual effort, it felt that by gaining an understanding of the game and its many systems, I had achieved some tangible victory I could attach my pride to. If people can brag about a PhD, I can surely get some credit for the methodical, obsessive study and taming of a video game, right? I would check the game's tome mechanic, which gives you a rough ranking, and I would see that I was in the top 25% of players and think, wow, I'm already doing better than 3/4 of people. If I put in a little bit more effort, then being in the top 10, 5, even 1% should be easy. What began as a personal challenge to myself became a spiral, a swirling vortex of water sliding down the drain and taking my days with it. I started watching heaps of Idleon content. I'd closely follow the schedule of the premier streamers like GriffyBit and IdleMane, because more often than not, you'll learn something new every time. Some new tip or trick or interaction between mechanics that would get the gears in your head only turning faster. I'd trawl the Idleon.Wiki for any gleam of another advantage I could use. I'd notice that Lava Flame, the developer, would be going live on Twitch, and I'd clear my schedule to make sure I was around. Surely I'd learn something, and he typically gives out freebies during streams. It would be the apex of stupidity not to closely pay attention to every moment. I would wake up in the night and stumble a beeline toward my computer in order to empty my inventory and do a few tasks to ensure my character could continue grinding the remaining nighttime hours unimpeded. Sometime I'd find an hour had passed before I made it back to bed. More than once, the sunrise ambushed me, like a parent catching their child coming home from sneaking out. While these things are mostly harmless in isolation, the problem was that these things became the entirety of what I was doing. Where I once had an online business to pour my time and attention into and isolate myself with, now I had a computer game and the community surrounding it. I don't have to ask. By now you know the definition of insanity. You may be curious, even with all the mechanics and systems, the active interactions of the game are still limited. How on earth were you able to sink so many days into that deep, deep hole? Your characters can claim AFK progress every 2 minutes, and with 10 characters, that means you could technically switch between a character every 12 seconds to reach the pinnacle of optimization. Even I never went so far as to go mad with pursuing that level of efficiency, but from the outskirts of the community, I've seen many names walk wordlessly into that sea. It's easy to pass a day when there's always something to do. The game is dense enough that there's always a task somewhere that needs done, no matter the actual level of importance. There's the daily task list of your guild, the daily challenges, the actual quests that are supposed to compose the campaign of the game, plus a 12 other facets that can always benefit from a bit of active attention. He's been mentioned throughout the video, but any discussion of Idleon will ultimately ring a bit hollow, without mention of the game's sole developer and creator, Lava Flame 2. We can't talk about Lava Flame 1 or bad things will happen. So let's talk about Lava Flame 2. The developer of Idleon has been mostly secretive about himself and his identity, but occasionally on his streams he talks about his own life and struggles. And of course, his new PB on the bench press. For something as wide and deep as Idleon, as detailed and creative as the worlds and creatures are, it's still difficult for me to conceive that it's all made by one person. Of course, there are some assets in early worlds that were pulled from marketplaces, but I hardly consider that an offense. Pre-made assets are tools, and when you're working on something of this scope, it's foolish not to consider every tool at your disposal. Lava's streams aren't archived, at least anywhere I could find. I've attended and dutifully paid attention to about 15 of the streams throughout my time as an Idleon player, and my general impression of Lava is that he's a chill dude with an immense amount of both ambition and stress. During one of the streams following an update, he mentioned how he'd barely slept the last few nights due to working on the game, and how he was on only a few hours of sleep at the time due to rushing to meet the deadline he'd set. You could tell by his voice, the dude was fucking exhausted. Yet, he still apologized to the community for not releasing things sooner. I don't recall if it was this stream or another, but after some pointed probing from chat about why things were taking so long, he simply admitted that the game had already overwhelmingly consumed his life, and he had no more free time to give. In his words, he wakes up, goes to the gym, works on Idleon, goes for a run, and goes to bed. He wakes up the next day, goes for a run, works on Idleon, goes to the gym, and goes to bed. Even in the case that his words were a bit of an exaggeration, it paints the portrait of a guy in his mid to late 20s or early 30s who started a game and maybe wasn't fully prepared for the scope and breadth it would grow to. Sometimes, pictures can be mirrors. Luckily, since that stream, he's seemed to take a more considerate approach to his work-life balance, at least to the extent that he no longer audibly sounds as exhausted as he did back then. But still, in a non-parasocial way, Lava Flame absolutely fascinates me. He feels like the inverse, the mirror opposite of what I had become due to my obsession. While I was consumed with taking in the game and grinding and exploring the possibilities of all the mechanics, he was consumed with producing the game and siphoning his passion out into a project we all readily lapped up and begged for more of. There is a lot of hate for Lava in the community and spread across the other parts of the web, and I think a significant part of this comes from the fact that, as noted, he does everything himself. Thus, there's a specific person to point the blame at when there's something you don't like, or a new feature comes out and it isn't what you'd built it up to be in your head. There is no PR manager, there is no community relations staff, there isn't even a customer support staff. If you have a problem, you email Lava. If you see a social media post about the game, it was made by Lava. If you see an update for the game come through but there aren't patch notes yet, it's because the update was put up by Lava, and Lava hasn't had the time to write out all the notes yet. It's all Lava, baby! Who at the same time is handling development of future content, bug fixes for current content, plus the whole side of in-game purchases and monetization, which surely require special handling. Of course, sometimes he missteps, but I feel anyone carrying that much can be forgiven for occasionally misjudging where their feet will fall. Of all the issues I've seen raised, none of them have ever come across as malicious. Instead, all of the instances seem to be things that were approached and designed from a specific point of view, and then due to complexity of other systems or outside variables, didn't go as smoothly as planned. One could trace this issue back to Lava, saying he should have more beta testers and they should be given more time. After all, he is the one who sets the deadlines and the date for releases. There is no boss or parent company he is beholden to. I agree with this sentiment. One of the updates in recent memory, the World 5 whole release, the beta testers only had a handful of hours to try things out before the update went live. As the game depends on you to wait real-time hours for progression to happen, you can imagine that even with insider knowledge, the testers weren't able to get very far. They weren't given practical quantities of the new consumables, the lanterns, that allow you to skip time in the content, and reportedly were not given any of the in-game gems currency that would be used to purchase said lanterns. Due to this severe limitation placed on the beta testers, they could only assess the immediately available content. So when the update went live a couple hours later, those with deep real-life money pockets, or who had stocked in-game currency, were able to buy out the supply of lanterns and break the system in ways not anticipated or tested for. In the past, testers have leaked huge amounts of information about in-development content, and after that point, Lava seemed to withdraw in regards to letting others try out content before it launched. So what was the result of this lantern fiasco? Lava enacted a blanket rollback for those who had progressed past a certain amount that he deemed reachable. Their progress for several mechanics was set back to the levels that they were at before the update released. For most, this would seem fair, except that due to it being a blanket implementation, many players who hadn't knowingly exploited the game, or who hadn't exploited it at all, but had instead made significant progress due to grinding, those people also had their progress reversed. A specific example from IdleMane is of a player who had 100,000 hours invested at the Bravery Monument pre-update. Then, due to such a level of progress, the update rolled it back to 24,000 hours. As a lot of players had paid real-world money for the progress on the lanterns, having this reversed with no compensation was the final straw, and the game suffered a significant brain drain of high-level players who had simply had enough. For those who stuck with the game, the stat increases they were able to keep was still higher than what was practically reachable for most players, an example of the widening gap of power between players who played the game for free and those who were able to purchase additional in-game items. The general concept and existence of this gap in player power is really the source of almost all drama and controversy surrounding Idleon. The red-hot catalyst that most agree ignited the issue was the introduction of the companion system. Once a week, you get a free roll for a pet companion, each species of which gives a different bonus, though these bonuses do not stack if you own multiple of the same pet. These bonuses range from the mundane, like small stat percentage boosts, to utterly game-changing, like the dedicated RAM. The RAM allows you to use the storage chest from anywhere instead of forcing you to return to town every time your inventory fills up. The Sheepy makes all of your big bubbles and alchemy active all the time for all characters, instead of the limit of 2, later 3, per character. The premier gem of the companions, however, is the venerable King Dute. In the World 5 skill Divinity, which is kinda like World 4's Lab, but very different from World 3's Worship, bear with me here. No, not that bear. In Divinity, assigning your character to a worship altar will confer certain bonuses either to that specific character or to your party as a whole. While since then there have been additions to the game that allow much more flexibility with your Divinity assignment, for most of the skill's history, the most Divinity blessings you could have per character was 2. Some would even require you to leave your character there AFK all the time, like Lab. With Dute, all 10 altars are active on all 10 characters all the time. Side note, isn't it wild that I have to explain system upon system just to give a base understanding of what the hell I'm talking about? The effects of having all 10 active at all time is indescribable without sounding like hyperbole. It's like living in the Stone Age and then suddenly living in modern times.
With a gun.
The progress you're able to make changes your playstyle considerably, and the gap between where you're suddenly at and where you just were might as well be oceans of time. You're saying, that doesn't sound too bad though. Getting Dude isn't that hard, right? You get a free spin every week, and there were only 11 companions until recently. That doesn't sound too bad. It was. The chances of rolling a King Doot pet range from 0.28% to 0.85%, depending on what number roll you were on and the cost you paid for that roll. A pity system was later put into place where you're guaranteed a Doot after 200 rolls, which, if you stick to the free rolls, that's only 4 years. One community member and content maker at the time, 100mar, made a calculator to figure out how much you would need to spend in real-world money to guarantee a Doot. To pay for the maximum of 200 spins would cost approximately $430 US, not including sales tax or other fees that may apply. That is with recycling the unsuccessful pets and using those gems to also pay for rolls. In fairness, Lava has said more recently that the way he did Doot was a big mistake, and he wishes he could have implemented things differently. He's considered changing it, but didn't think it would be fair to those who had spent the upwards of $400 to get the Bone Boy. Since then, we've had additions in the Whole and now in World 7 that allow you to get 99% of Doot's benefits without any sort of monetary effort. If you want to go all the way and be a real OG, you can even get a Doot for free if you find a generous player, since now you're able to trade away a single copy of any of your pets. There is even a new pet, the Pig, that grants the receiver free auto loot, removing another barrier of entry for players trying to get serious about the game. Though this individual point has been remedied, there's still a lot of contention in other parts of the player power gap issue. To incentivize the purchase of more in-game currency, you're presented with a revolving catalog of premium gem packs, which include premium gem in-game currency at a discounted price, as well as at least 1 or 2 very powerful items or account-wide bonuses. At first, these gem packs included things like time skip candies and equipment that provided a respectable 40% boost to AFK gains for a single character, but now give increasingly powerful bonuses like an account-wide 50% multiplicative damage boost, or a permanent 2.5 times multiplier for all coins dropped by all monsters. These bonuses often come in the form of exclusive pet companions you can only get from these bundles. The gap between someone who's able to buy all the packs and utilize all the bonuses, and someone who can't, that gap grows every day. Many long-term players have left the game over this issue, quitting in protest, as it ruins the competitive angle of the game to have players that can simply pay their way to the top. There isn't a direct player versus player aspect to Idleon like you'd imagine in a multiplayer game, but there are cooperative efforts such as guilds and party dungeons where a degree of interaction can happen. And again, everyone wants to have a bigger number. Everyone wants to see that 1% on their tome score. Prior to the launch of World 7, Lava mentioned on his stream that players getting grossly overpowered wouldn't have that much of an effect on things long term. With the launch of World 7, we see that he implemented this as a sliding debuff on your character's skills and stats depending on how powerful you are, only effective while you're in World 7 trying to push and progress the new content. I'm not sure if that's the way to go about it either. While it may seem excessive for him to be putting out multiple limited time gem packs at a time, if you popped into any of his streams, you'd see that people are often begging for more gem pack options, or for older ones to be put back into rotation. This truly is a case of giving the people what they want, and it not making them happy. My perspective is that it came from people wanting to buy more gems, but feeling that buying them in isolation is just a bad deal, when eventually there's going to be a gem pack that's a better deal and comes with more stuff. Why not just wait until then? Rather, why wait at all? Just put out more gem packs, dude! To the people who don't want all those gem packs, it may seem excessive or predatory. I would be on the side that this isn't the case, except for one aspect. A large percentage of the bonuses available for purchase are advertised as for a limited time only, and they pop up frequently. Limited time events and availabilities are not new to online gaming, and I could ramble for a long time about my thoughts on gacha and the whole psychology of exploitation behind it, but just because it's commonplace doesn't mean I have to like it. One may say that these additional purchases are optional and the core experience of the game doesn't include them, but there's a mechanic that I think insists to the contrary: the slab. The slab is basically a big-ass checklist. Do you have this item or have you touched it before? And Idleon has about 2,000 opportunities to check yes. Like a blessing from a hoarding deity, your character will get a bonus from each and every check on that list. Individually, it may not seem like much, but their strength comes in numbers. And as you may have guessed, all these checks also contribute to your tome score. And as time goes on, so many of these entries on the checklist are only completable by spending money, or, even worse, having spent money at a specific point in time. The game considers obtaining these items part of the regular, standard Idleon experience. The fissure at the feet of free players widens to a canyon. While we're still relatively early in World 7, the bonuses we're starting to be able to unlock come close to rivaling those presented in some of the paid packs. And tied with the sliding debuff, my perspective is I think this may be Lava's more earnest attempt to bring balance to this issue. I just think it's going to take time to really even out.
Throughout the making of this video and the writing and recording of the script, I talked to many people. An element I didn't expect to be present in almost all of these conversations was fear. While on the surface, the issue of lava flame may seem innocuous, there's a lot that I don't think many people realize is happening. Many community members and several of the prominent content creators of the game refuse to speak to me on record. Many refuse to take part in the video at all because, in the summarized words of many, if we say something bad, lava's going to come after us. When people have been critical of the game, they have been banned from the game's Discord, which is the primary and foremost source of information regarding the game. Exclusive information as content is posted in the Discord, and without access, it's very likely you will miss out on content. When people make videos criticizing the controversy of the month, Lava makes thinly veiled threats about how he won't, but he could copyright strike the video and have it taken down. He won't this time, but he could always change his mind. When a different creator put out his own speculation on why a main community member and wiki contributor was banned from the public Discord without public reason or explanation, Lava threatened to sue him for libel. It doesn't matter that the creator's speculation was incorrect. A line has been crossed. If you are a long-standing community member and content creator for the game, if you have spent countless hours helping others and filling the roles that Lava himself has failed to fill, if you speak out against Daddy Lava, you'll be threatened with legal action for threatening to destroy his livelihood. Brother, you're destroying your own livelihood by threatening to sue the very people you owe part of your success to. These people altogether have put thousands of hours into promotion for the game, thousands of hours of content for the game, all for free. And your response to any criticism is to fucking sue them? How fucking short-sighted can you be? And listen, I get being defensive about your work. That's normal. But there is a massive gap between being protective and being petty, especially when you live in a state like Lava's that has very stringent anti-slap laws. I know you're likely watching this, Lava, so please understand my words come from a place of compassion when I tell you, you need to chill the fuck out and quit the bullshit. Focus less on the bench press, do some kettlebells, and open up your chakras. Whatever the hell they say. You are a public figure now, whether you like it or not. Idleon frequently pops into the top 100 games on Steam, and your live streams frequently pull more attendees than the populations of most of the towns I've lived in. You have to accept the criticism that's going to come with that, especially as a solo developer in the modern age of gaming. I also understand that by mentioning these things, it increases the chances that Lava is going to take action and try to strike this video from the internet. All the parts of this video fall under fair use laws, but part of the reason this video took so long is because I've been making a DMCA-proof version of the video with no visual or audio elements from Idleon. If this one gets struck down, I'll just put that one up. It's the same, except all the media has been replaced with a note telling you Lava made me do it. I'll also spend a bunch of money on ads to make sure people see that version. I have attempted to contact Lava Flame many times over the year or so that I've been considering and making this video. I never once have received a reply. The sad part is, Lava hasn't always been this way. We can look at his Congregate account, which still hosts a wide selection of games he made before Idleon. He made the account of May of 2010. He uploaded his first game, Supa Dodge, in October of 2012. You can still go there and play the majority of these games, although some are seemingly now lost media. The point is, following all information and impressions, Lava started making games when he was like 12, and you can follow his progression in game making and, by extension, part of his life through these entries. For the first 2 years, he mostly made silly games that many would consider experiments rather than games. His first idle game, Super Benching Simulator, came out in 2014, though he didn't seem to truly get serious about game making until Super Idle Master in 2015, with Idle Lifting coming out a few months later in July. It's from there you can see him start to formulate and build upon what would eventually become Idle Skilling, his breakout hit that further evolved into the very Idleon we speak of now.
Over time, you see his vision start to take form, and watch his skills evolve from ambitious to genuinely impressive. I had such a smile seeing the medals from Idle Awards pop up as a new tier of crop in the farming skill. If you've seen him do any design work on stream, or from the few clips he's posted in the Discord, you can tell he's become a master of the pixel art medium. In my video on Dandadan, I talked about how mesmerizing it was to watch series creator and artist Yukinobu Tatsu work. I find the same is true with Lava. There's fluidity in his movements that only comes with years of experience, and nimble dexterity, assuming he's doing all of this with a mouse. I really don't know. Remember, almost every asset is designed by Lava, even the music. And now I can confidently say that the art of Idleon is some of my favorite of any game, ever. Have you ever taken the time to actually look at the background art of the stages, especially in the later worlds? Have you ever considered the timeless design of the board beam? After almost 9,000 real-life meat space reality hours, I present Idleon with a rating of 8 out of 10 board beans. Whether more or less board beans mean a better score, I choose to remain ambiguous. If you're interested in Idleon, you can play for free on Steam, mobile, or legendsofidleon.com. You will be confused, so I suggest you check out my friend IdleManeZed for guidance.
I get dicked down by God. I'm a godless man.
Despite design choices I may disagree with or think are particularly short-sighted, I can't find it in myself to hop aboard the Lava hate train. Perhaps there is extra sympathy I afford his perspective because of my projection that he's a potential version of myself, one where I didn't fall in battle to complacency's blade. We're all branches of the same man, after all. For a long time I attributed the responsibility of my failure to a video game as a way to avoid confronting my own shortcomings. Even at the time, there was the nagging feeling that my days were slipping away. I should probably do something more with the finite amount of time in the sun my life could potentially hold. Looking back, it's just a weight of churning resentment at myself, at the time I spent stagnant.
Do you know what it means to find a new definition of insanity? My parents are getting old. My nephews are growing up. My own youth is nothing but the trickling grains of sand in a weathered and weary hourglass. If I stay still too long, I'll miss it all. It's shameful, the amount of life that I've lost to stillness. I told myself that it was the good life, lazing about all day with a false sense of accomplishment, but there is no life there. It began as a crutch to help me deal with, and then later avoid, issues I felt that I could put off indefinitely. Tomorrow's problems are always tomorrow's problems. Most people live their whole lives looking for an excuse. For a moment, I found mine between lines of code and imagination. As for now, I'm still figuring it out. Hunting my own ghost for sports and hope that the spoils will one day truly cure, instead of just being a balm that soothes but never heals. In the end, I think of Brent, sitting in that room, surrounded by his paper empire. I see Lava. I see myself. I find pieces of myself in every person I meet, and when we shake hands, our shadows often overlap. Thank you for watching. Stay hungry.